What's up, guys? It's your boys Wokey back at with another Chris Watts video. And because of my last video apparently tanking and not having any audio, I have to redo it. So, unfortunately, this is not going to be my complete first reaction with this video because I've already watched it. I've already seen it and so forth like that. So we're going to watch it, probably speed things up through the video here just a little bit, just so, because I've already watched it, but we're going to be talking about it together. But first, we're going to be going over to Secret in the Dark, another YouTube channel that I definitely do enjoy very much. And this video was Chris Watts, I want the truth, DA Michael Rourke, that he hid at my sentence, or I want the truth. DA Michael Rourke hid at my sentence trial. It's kind of almost a tongue twisters, but we're going to be looking at this video. But before we go any further, make sure you guys are subscribed to my YouTube channel by hitting that white bar icon down at the bottom right. Hit that bell icon next to it. So when I do post videos like this one, you guys will get that little ring notification that I've posted that video. And then you guys can watch, comment, like, and share. And again, I thank you also very much for that love and support, and then show that same love and support over at Secret in the Dark. They're almost so close to 7,000 subscribers. And with that being said, let's get into the video.
I will love you.
And stand by.
And stand by you.
As long as we both shall live.
As long as we both shall live.
Oh,
November
Chris.
19th, 2018, Chris Watts walked into a Colorado courtroom, not to defend himself, not to face a jury, and not to explain what happened in the early hours of August 13th. He was there for one reason, so a judge could tell him how the rest of his life would be spent. Everything else had already been decided.
However, I do want to spend a few minutes sharing with the court the details of the crime, as so far you've only had an opportunity to review the affidavit and a few facts here and there that have been offered to.
So pretty much Chris or Mr. DA Rourke is the one that decided Chris Watts' fate. It seems like the prosecutors, or this gentleman, is the one that decided it, when it should be in front of Chris Watts' peers of jury members. I don't think it should be up to one person.
The court in the motions and pleadings that have been filed.
By then the investigation was over, or at least the version of it the public would ever see. No trial, no cross-sex examination, no forensic breakdown in open court. Just a plea deal, signed quietly behind closed doors. District Attorney Michael Rourke stood between the truth and the record, and from that moment on, only his voice would be heard. The judge, by Rourke's own admission, had seen little more than the arrest affidavit and a few select motions. He had not heard witnesses. He had not seen the full case file. He didn't even know the motive. Because
So how do you sentence somebody when none of that has been shown? Just because you took a man's word? I mean, the man lies all the time. So they're taking Chris Watts' word instead of looking at all the evidence, all the documentation, everything that they collected. Where is it? Why can't they show it? Why didn't they show it? Pretty much, yeah, okay, we understand why, or we want to find out why Chris Watts did what he did, but you didn't even try. You took his plea deal, or his guilty plea deal, and was like, yep, we got him, we're done. There's more to it, though.
no one could or would give him one. The version of events the world was left with came from two sources, Chris Watts and Michael Rourke. One had every reason to lie. The other had every power to decide which lies to keep. Even in his final confession, Chris gave the same story over and over again. It was repeated for hours, never challenged for more than 5 minutes. And when the ink dried on that plea agreement, those hours of questioning no longer mattered. The mistress cleared almost immediately. No subpoena, no courtroom questioning, no chance for the public to hear her under oath. She vanished from the narrative as quickly as she entered it, leaving questions that to this day have no official.
And that is not sus in itself. That's not red flagged enough to, oh, she completely went and disappeared. Then we should talk to her.
Answer.
So the court is going to sentence Mr. Watts as follows. With regard to count number 1, murder in the first degree as it relates to Shanann Watts, the court is going to sentence you, sir, to a life sentence in the Colorado Department of Corrections, followed with no possibility of parole.
That, for those that think Team Chris, he's not getting out. He's going to die there.
And that is going to run consecutively to all but counts 3 and 4. With regard to count 2, as it relates to murder in the first degree, with Bella, the court is going to sentence you to life in the Colorado Department of Corrections.
You really wish watching this you could see like their thought bubbles.
With no possibility of parole. With regard to count number 3, the court is going to sentence you as it relates to Celeste to life in the Colorado Department of Corrections with no possibility of parole. With regard to counts 4 and 5 relating to Bella and Celeste as a different theory of first-degree murder, the court is going to sentence you to life in the Colorado Department of Corrections. And
So they get to have theories, but the people that make YouTube channels, Facebook pages, Reddit posts, they're not allowed to have theories. That's what I think is kind of weird, that we're not allowed to have theories, as long, I think they should be also respective theories, and not something blown out of proportion, and should be more fact driven. But I feel that it's wrong to say that we're not allowed to have theories, but they are.
legally, those sentences must run concurrently as a different theory of first-degree murder. Recognizing the unlawful termination of pregnancy for the unborn child that has been named Nichol, the court absolutely believes
Didn't even get a
that
chance
the
to
maximum
live.
sentence of 48 years would be appropriate to run consecutive
That's
to the other charges,
Wrong.
with an additional mandatory parole period of 3 years as set forth by statute.
And so, in less than 20 minutes, the courtroom closed the book on a case that still had its most important pages missing. The whys and
So
the
many
how,
gaps.
sealed forever by a squiggly line on a plea deal. This is not the story you've been told. This is the story of the truth that was never put on trial. On that cold November morning,
Yes.
the courtroom felt less like a place of justice and more like a stage already set for the final scene. Chris Watts entered in a prison jumpsuit, flanked by deputies, his face drained of the media-trained smiles he had shown just weeks earlier. But here's what no one watching from the gallery knew. The real trial had never happened. There was no battle over evidence, no testing of theories. Every word, every fact the judge was about to hear came from the desk of District Attorney Michael Rourke. Rourke told everyone in that court that the judge had only reviewed the arrest affidavit and a few carefully selected motions. That means, in a case that shocked the world,
That's it. That's all this man gave. There should be a lot more given.
the presiding judge had not seen full investigative files. He had not read entire transcripts. He had not heard one live witness. The weight of the sentence he was about to hand down
He should have.
rested entirely on the prosecutor's account. And that account had holes. Rourke openly admitted
Gaps.
there was no confirmed motive, no timeline the public could verify, no explanation of how the crime unfolded beyond Chris Watts's own words. Yet Rourke was about to stand in this courtroom and tell a story, one he controlled, and one no one in that room would be allowed to challenge.
That's pretty
Chris
messed up.
Watts had already waived his right to a trial. He had told his lawyers to stand down. And with that single choice, every cross-examination, every challenge to the state's narrative was erased. The plea deal ensured that the only voice the judge would hear was the prosecutor's. And the prosecutor was under no obligation to present.
We should have been able to talk to friends on both sides, Chris Watts' friends. We should have been able to talk to NK, Jim, Charlotte, the Rourkes, the Watts family. We should have been able to get all this information in front of Chris Watts' peers of the jury and let the evidence speak for itself. But no, they take a plea deal, and then they're not bargain, but plea deal, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna take this and run with it. We're gonna make it look like we did this case so fast that we're gonna be awesome, get pay raises and stuff.
Evidence
Who
that
knows?
raised doubt. The judge asked Watts if he understood the plea, if he entered it willingly. Watts answered yes, but no one asked him, under oath, to detail what actually happened in that house. No one questioned the contradictions in his earlier statements. The story that might have unraveled under scrutiny was left untouched. because this courtroom wasn't built for questions. It was built for closure. And closure came fast for some. The woman at the center of Watts's affair, Nichol Kessinger, was cleared within days of the plea. No subpoena, no sworn testimony, no public accounting of her actions that summer. She was framed as a victim and allowed to walk away, a decision made and defended by the same man,
By
now
one
controlling
man.
the courtroom narrative, Michael Rourke. From here, every fact the public would remember about the Watts murders would be filtered through one
This woman back here looks like familiar. I'm like trying to see if it's NK.
voice, one man. And even in his own words, he admitted the most basic truth, that he didn't know why it happened, that he could not explain what could drive a man to annihilate his family. And yet, he asked the judge to sentence without ever finding out.
See,
This wasn't a trial.
I think that's messed up. They should have taken it to trial.
It was a closing ceremony for a case still missing its heart. And from this moment on, the truth would be whatever the prosecutor decided to tell. The sentencing hearing began with a formality.
Oh my gosh.
The defense had nothing to add,
She's so mad.
no counter-narrative, no evidence to present. Their role was reduced to a silent acknowledgement that the deal was done. Then, Michael Rourke stood. In that moment, the power shifted entirely to him. Whatever he chose to say would become the official record of one of the most publicized murder cases in Colorado history. He began not with proof, but
United States history almost.
with a statement of certainty. He told the judge that Chris Watts was guilty, that the crimes were deliberate, that they were calculated. He described the bodies being hidden at an oil site, the
Agreed.
shallow grave for Shanann, the crude oil tanks where the girls were placed. But what Rourke didn't say was just as important as what he did. He didn't tell the court how he knew the sequence of events. He didn't explain the absence of independent forensic confirmation in open court. He did not mention that Chris Watts had never been asked, under oath, to recount the night in detail. Instead, Rourke spoke in broad strokes, painting a picture that fit neatly into the guilty plea, but left the unanswered questions untouched. He claimed that Watts had a desire for a fresh start, for a new relationship, but offered no evidence beyond the existence of an affair. He never
Excuse me.
addressed the
My goodness.
contradictions in the timeline. He never addressed why Chris's earlier story was abandoned so quickly, or why it had only been challenged for minutes in an interrogation that lasted hours.
Man, Secret in the Dark does have a way with words. I tell you what, like listening to this, it just like opens your mind, and like the biggest red flags are right there. Like everything that this man is spitting out is like a mic drop. Like, boom, we got you. Boom, we got you. But what stands in the way? A district attorney that doesn't want to look at it anymore. I mean, I'm not spreading any rumors. I've heard so many different rumors about the DA. It's not even funny. I'm just reacting. So I'm not saying it whatsoever. But it's definitely something that makes you pissed off, that why does one man get to decide another man's fate, but then not decide a woman's fate that possibly was involved with all the information that we've seen and have collected, not just myself, but all the YouTubers out there, Instagrammers, Facebookers, whatever have you, all the stuff that they have found points NK is being completely deceiving. That she was involved in some shape or form. We just don't know how much of a percentage she was involved. 100%, 50%, 12%? Like, we want to find that out. And one man is the reason why we can't continue anymore.
The judge listened in silence. He had no other version of events to compare. The defense remained bound by their client's instructions. The entire courtroom was hearing a single, unchallenged account from one man, the prosecutor, who had already admitted he didn't know why the crime happened. And when Rourke spoke of motive, he offered none, only speculation. He admitted that
He literally just told us the story of how everything happened and then concluded he's guilty. We're done. Shouldn't we know more? Shouldn't we see more?
true reason may never be known. Yet he urged the court to move forward with sentencing. He told the judge there was no need for a trial, no need for further investigation. The plea deal, he argued, had spared the families more pain. But what it had really spared was the state from scrutiny. Scrutiny of an investigation that ended the moment Watts agreed to sign. Scrutiny of a mistress who was cleared before she was ever questioned under oath. Scrutiny of a case where the judge was asked to deliver the harshest sentence.
And I know being a mistress or having an affair is not illegal, but it flippin' should be. There is so much out there nowadays in the United States that people just give up. They don't want to try. They either get divorced or they have an affair with multiple people or one or whatever have you. And then they wonder why they're looked at badly. They don't want to be looked at of one bad moment of their time. But then you get stuff like this guy wants to murder his current family for a new one. That's not what you get to do there, Chris. But yet people continue to do that. That's probably why the United States is so, like, I think statistically, I think it's almost half now that people that get married get divorced because they get bored or they don't want to try anymore. It's like, and then there's not only people like Chris, but there's people that have murdered or hired for murder or do it for insurance money. It's ridiculous how people are.
Without ever seeing the full picture. In that courtroom, the verdict wasn't the product of a trial. It was the product of an agreement. And every detail the public believes about that night, from motive to method to aftermath, was filtered through Michael Rourke's carefully chosen words. When he finished, the defense again had nothing to add. The judge pronounced the sentence, 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, plus additional years for other charges. Chris Watts did not speak. The gavel fell, and the case was declared closed. But the truth was never put on trial, and the questions that should have been asked in that courtroom still hang in the air, unanswered.
Thank you
so much
for coming out here with me, Christopher. I'm having a wonderful time. You mean a lot to me, and I'm glad that you're having a blast.
But you told Charlotte he just wasn't really, or you weren't really into him. You weren't feeling him.
I am so out of breath.
In the months after the murders, one name surfaced and vanished faster than any other. Nichol Kessinger. She was Chris Watts's co-worker, and by her own admission, his mistress in the weeks leading up to the killings. She told investigators she knew nothing about what happened.
She ain't no Amber Fry. I'll tell you what. With her and I don't want to give you my phone. Why do you even need my phone? And I'm looking up net worth and Googling man says he's leaving his woman for his mistress. Wedding dresses. Amber Fry didn't do that. She literally did not know. But Nichol did.
She said she believed he was in the process of separating from his wife. She claimed she thought Shanann and the children were out of the picture before August 13th.
Lies.
Her interviews with police were never conducted in a courtroom. She was never placed under oath in front of a judge. No defense attorney had the chance to question her, to explore contradictions, or to compare her statements against phone records in real time.
Right?
And yet, even before Chris Watts signed his plea deal, Kessinger had been cleared.
That's so
the
wrong.
Official position from the district attorney's office was that she was not a suspect, not a person of interest. The investigation into her stopped almost as quickly as it began. There were no subpoenas for her personal devices beyond the initial request. No search warrants for her home.
Should've.
No sworn testimony to lock her statements into the official record.
Should've.
What the public knows about her involvement comes almost entirely from her own words and a limited set of documents. Documents released only after the plea deal sealed the case.
And then
Michael Rourke defended the...
And then were used or were redacted afterwards. A lot of it was redacted. And why would you redact something? Because you don't want somebody to read it.
Decision. He presented her as someone who had been deceived by Watts, not as someone who might have had knowledge of what happened in those critical hours. And once the plea was signed, her role was closed off from public scrutiny entirely. In high-profile cases, associates, friends, and romantic partners of the accused are often questioned repeatedly, even aggressively, to rule out the possibility of shared planning or concealment.
Oh, do they now?
That process was brief, contained, and quickly abandoned. The absence of a trial meant the absence of any legal requirement to bring Nichol Kessinger into the courtroom. Without that requirement, she remained outside the official record, and with her absence, an entire avenue of questioning disappeared. The public was told she was simply a woman who made a poor choice in falling for a married man.
She's full of crap.
But no one outside of law enforcement has ever been able to examine her statements under pressure. No one has seen her confronted with conflicting evidence in a courtroom.
Nobody ever asked her about her ping. Hey, why did you ping in Frederick, Colorado, the same time Chris left his house the day of the murders? No, we get questions like, how did you meet? What did you eat at the Lazy Dog? Are you a Virgo? Like, this is the kind of questions that they were asking. And if they did get any questions, the father jumped in and was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Don't lead. No, shut your mouth. I run the show here. That's what it literally felt like watching.
Her swift exit from the case is one of its most enduring silences. And it was a silence made possible by the same decision that shaped the rest of the investigation. The decision to end it all with a plea deal. In most trials, motive is not required by law, but it is pursued relentlessly because it helps a jury make sense of the evidence. Here, there was no jury to convince. There was only a judge who had already agreed to the terms of the plea deal. Without the need to persuade 12 citizens beyond a reasonable doubt, the state had no incentive to dig deeper, to confront contradictions, or to account for missing details. Rourke's admission should have been the start of more questions. How could such a brutal crime have no clear reason? How could an investigation close without a single solid answer to the most basic why? But instead, it became the final word. The judge heard it, acknowledged it, and moved on to sentencing. The families were told that the plea deal spared them the pain of a trial. What it really spared was the prosecution from having to stand in a courtroom and defend its case against scrutiny. No one would challenge the timeline. No one would test the physical evidence in front of a jury. No one would press Chris Watts to reconcile the differences between his original
It's literally like hearing my opinions, my thoughts, my word is the truth, and you have to listen to it, and you can't challenge it. Don't even talk about it, like he has said, because his way is the right way.
Story and the one the state adopted. The sentencing went forward with that gap wide open. The judge pronounced 3 consecutive life sentences, plus decades more for the additional charges. The courtroom emptied. The cameras left, and the official record closed with the most important questions still unanswered. Why did it happen? How did it unfold? And what was left out of the story the public was told? Those answers remain locked away not because they couldn't be found, but because no one in that courtroom was required to find them. When the gavel fell, the Watts case was over in the eyes of the court. But for those who had been watching closely, it felt less like justice served and more like a door slammed shut before the full story could be told. The plea deal had accomplished its purpose. It had secured a conviction. It had eliminated the risk of a trial. And it had allowed the prosecution to control every detail of the narrative presented to the judge, the media, and the public. It also meant that no new evidence would be brought into the open. The original interviews with Chris Watts would never be dissected under oath. The unanswered questions about the timeline, the cause of death, and the inconsistencies between his accounts would never be tested in front of a jury.
Should be.
The role of others, however small or significant, would never be explored in a courtroom. Michael Rourke's voice was the last one the public heard in the case, and because there was no trial, there was no competing version of events. His statements became the official truth by default, even as he admitted that the central motive remained unknown. The judge sentenced Chris Watts to life in prison without the possibility of parole. It was the harshest sentence available under the plea agreement. But the sentence did not answer the questions that had driven the world's attention to this case. It did not explain why a seemingly ordinary father would commit such acts. It did not.
Because he was pushed into it by a mistress. Ding, 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 ding.
Account for the speed with which key figures, like Nichol Kessinger, were removed from scrutiny. It did not resolve the gaps between the physical evidence and the story told in court.
There's a lot of
For the
gaps.
families, the case was over. For the state, the case was closed. But for anyone seeking the full truth, the real investigation never began. The questions of how and why, the very questions that define a murder case, remain locked away, sealed not by lack of evidence, but by the choice to stop looking. The courtroom was not the place where the truth came out. It was the place where the truth was buried under the weight of an agreement, and where the final act was performed without the full script ever being read. And that is why, years later, the Watts case stands as one of the most haunting examples of a verdict without...
And again, do you know how you get rid of that problem where you want people to not talk about the case anymore? Just talk to NK and then we'll all shut up. Because all we want to know is if she was there or not, and that's all you got to do. You can't tell me that would take a lot of money to ask a few questions to Miss Nichol, or Chris Watts underneath a lie detector. Did you have help? Why did NK's phone ping there? Was it because she was there? Yes or no? Like, that's all you got to do. And then this case will go quiet. I guarantee it.
A trial. A story concluded, but never truly told.
Your Honor, there are no words to adequately describe the
I saw that girl side eye. Do you see that? Hold on, look at this.
Your Honor, there are no words to adequately describe the unimaginable
Side-eyed him.
that brings us before this court today. By my comments, I'm not even going to try to express the horror, the pain, or the suffering that the defendant has caused to these families, to this community, and to all who were a part of this investigation. However, I do want to spend a few minutes sharing with the court the details of the crime, as so far you've only had an opportunity to review the affidavit and a few facts here and there that have been offered to the court in the motions and pleadings that have been filed. The questions that have screamed out to anyone who will listen since August 13th of 2018 are why and how. Why did this have to happen? How could a seemingly normal husband and father annihilate his entire family? For what? These are the questions that only one individual in this courtroom or on this planet knows the answers to. I fully expect we will not receive the answers to these questions today, nor will we at any point in the future. I don't expect that he will ever tell the truth about what truly happened or why. Even if he did, there is no rational way that any human being could find those answers acceptable responses to such horrific questions. The best we can do is try to piece together some kind of understanding from the evidence that is available to us. And the evidence tells us this. The defendant coldly and deliberately ended 4 lives. Not in a fit of rage, not by way of accident, but in a calculated and sickening manner.
But he wasn't smart enough.
Shanann was 34 years old. She had married the defendant in November of 2012. Over the weekend leading up to August 13th, she had been at a work conference in Phoenix, Arizona, and returned home in the early morning hours of August 13th. We know that she got home about 1:45 in the morning. The doorbell camera on their home shows her arriving back home from the airport. Shortly thereafter, at least according to the defendant, they had what he referred to as an emotional conversation about the state of their marriage and
he doesn't know how to have an emotional conversation
about what their lives would look like going forward. What was said during that emotional conversation, only he knows. What we do know is that shortly after that, the defendant strangled her to death with his own hands. We know that he slowly took her life the morning of August 13th.
It takes 2 to 4, possibly 5 minutes to strangle somebody. Just think in that 2 to 4-ish, 5 minutes, he could have let go.
We know that this was not done in an uncontrolled, vengeful manner that he tried to describe to agents from CBI and the FBI.
Because she made you mad.
If that were the case, you would expect to see vicious, horrible bruising about her neck, shoulders, and face. You would expect to see the highway bone in her neck broken. You would expect to see some kind of defensive wounds on his body as she struggled and fought for her own life. None of those are present. The only injuries that were on Shanann's body were one set of finger or bruising, what appeared to be fingernail or finger mark bruising to the right side of her neck. We know that our experts will tell us that it takes 2 to 4 minutes
2 to 4
to strangle
minutes.
someone to death manually with their own hands. The horror that she felt as the man that she loved wrapped his hands around her throat and choked the life out of her must have been unimaginable. Even worse, what must Bella, age 4, and Celeste, age 3, must have experienced or thought as their father, the one man on this planet who was supposed to nurture and protect them, was snuffing out their lives.
That's why it makes me mad.
They both died from smothering.
Which Chris has said, whoop, I don't need to see my tool, but Chris Watts has stated they were strangled. He never said smothered until later. Why did he say strangle compared to smother?
Let me say that again. The man seated to my right smothered his daughters. Why? Imagine the horror in Bella's mind as her father took her last breaths away. Your Honor, understand very clearly, Bella fought back for her life. The frenulum, the connective tissue between her upper lip and her gum, had a centimeter and a half laceration. She bit her tongue multiple times before she died. She fought back for her life as her father smothered her. Celeste had no such injuries. In fact, she had no external injuries at all. But according to the medical examiner, she was smothered nonetheless.
I hate that he's having to care for him and, oh, it's going to be okay. Ugh, I know he's his lawyer, but...
and calmly loaded their bodies into his work truck. Not in a hasty or...
This is why I don't know why Michael Rourke says their bodies. The girls were still alive when they left. We saw the shadows. He had carried one of the children out, and then one of the other ones were running, pattering. You could see the little small shadows. My goodness. And so that's why I don't know why he says they were carried out like they were already deceased.
Organized way. He was seen from the neighbor's doorbell camera.
It's like he doesn't know all of it.
Backing his truck into the driveway, going back and forth into the house, and back out to the truck 3 different times. 1 time for each of their bodies. He then drove them away from their family home 1 final time, intent on hiding any evidence of the crimes that he had just committed. In 1 final sign of callousness for his wife, his daughters, and their unborn son, and their remains, he drove them to a location that he thought no one would ever find them, to one of the oil tank batteries with which he was so familiar. He knew this was safe. He had texted a coworker the night before saying, I'll head out to that site. I'll take care of it. He had carefully ensured that he would
Also, he took a picture and sent it to NK for proof of the leak.
Be alone in the middle of the plains to secrete away the remains of his family in a place that he hoped they would never be found. In 1 final measure of disrespect for the family he once had, he ensured that they would not be together, even in death, or so he thought.
Sick man.
He disposed of them in different locations. He buried Shanann and Nichol in a shallow grave away from the oil tanks. Bella and Celeste were thrown away in the oil tanks at this facility. Different tanks, so these little girls wouldn't be together in death. Imagine this, Your Honor. This defendant took those little girls and put them through a hatch at the top of an oil tank, 8 inches in diameter. Bella had scratches on her left buttocks from being shoved through this hole.
Should do this to him.
A tuft of blonde hair was found on the edge of one of these hatches. The defendant told investigators that Bella's tank seemed emptier than CC's because of the sound that the splashes made. These were his daughters. Significantly, when his coworkers arrived at the tank battery later that morning, to a person, they all described him as acting completely normally. It was a normal workday, even while his daughter sank in the oil and water not far away from him. And then his efforts at deception truly began. We've all seen the emotionless interviews that the defendant gives to the local media, asking for help in locating his family. We watched as he claimed that the house was empty without them, and that he hoped that they were somewhere safe, and that he just wanted them to come home. He told investigators that they were at home sleeping when he left for work that morning, and that Shanann had told him that she was taking the girls to a friend's house for the day. What is striking about this case, Your Honor, beyond the horrors that I've already described to you, is the number of collateral victims that he created by his actions. While he stood in front of TV cameras asking for the safe return of his family, scores of law enforcement officers, neighbors, friends, and family scoured the area, fretted for their safe return. They texted him begging for any information and sending him their best wishes, all the while he hid what he had done.
Looking up vacation spots for him and Nichol.
The list of indirect victims does not end there. Think of the firefighters and the Colorado State Patrol hazmat experts who had to don
people that had
protective
retire
suits and who were called upon to pull Bella and Celeste out of those oil tanks. Or the coroner employees who had to conduct these autopsies. Or the victim assistants who frantically attempted to ease the suffering of those affected.
Sorry, Frankie.
All of this, Your Honor, for what? Why? Why did this have to happen? His motive was simple, Your Honor. He had a desire for a fresh start, to begin a relationship with a new love that overpowered all decency and feelings for his wife, his daughters, and unborn son. While Shanann texted the defendant over and over again in the days and weeks leading up to her death, attempting to save her marriage, the defendant secreted pictures of his girlfriend into his phone.
12,000 photos to be exact.
Searched and texted her at all hours of the night. While Shanann sent the defendant self-help and relationship counseling books, one of which, ironically enough, was thrown in the garbage. He was searching
But no, Chris is the victim.
the internet for secluded vacation spots to take his new love in researching jewelry. And while Shanann took the girls to visit family in North Carolina, the defendant went to car museums in the sand dunes with his new girlfriend. The stark contrast between the subjects of their internet and text content is absolutely stunning. Even the morning after he killed them and disposed of their bodies, he made several phone calls. One was to the school where the girls were supposed to start, telling the school that the girls would not be coming to school anymore, that they were being unenrolled, presumably to give him some more time before law enforcement notification about them going missing. He contacted a realtor to start discussing the selling of his house, and he texted with his girlfriend about their future. None of this answers the questions of why, however. If he was this happy and wanted a new start, get a divorce. You don't annihilate your family and throw them away like garbage. Why did Nico, Celeste, Bella, and Shanann have to lose their lives in order for him to get what he wanted? Your Honor, justice demands the maximum sentence under the agreement reached by the parties.
Should have been death.
As you will recall, the agreement calls for life sentences as to Shanann, Bella, and Celeste, and all of those to run consecutively to one another. It also calls for the count of unlawful termination of a pregnancy as to Nico to run consecutively to counts 1, 2, and 3. I would suggest that the extreme aggravation present in the defendant's conduct and in the efforts that I have described mandate that the sentences for counts 7, 8, and 9, the tampering with a deceased human body, each be the maximum of 12 years, and that those sentences run consecutively to one another. It is very clear that each of these acts, that these were not the subject of one act, but each oil tank that he walked up with his daughter's bodies and the hole that he dug for his wife and unborn son mandate a mandatory consecutive sentence. It's been alluded to this morning, but the defendant was certainly eligible for the death penalty in this case under the existing law in the state of Colorado. As you heard, Shanann's family strongly opposed my office seeking the death penalty and being bound to the criminal justice system for the next several decades. That's in large part, as you've heard, why we have reached the agreement that we have. 4 lives were lost at the hands of the defendant on August 13th for reasons that we will never fully understand, nor will we know. In the end, the Rourke family was much more merciful towards him than he was towards his wife, his daughters, and his unborn son.
That I agree with.
The remainder of his life is exactly where he belongs for murdering his entire family. Thank you.
Are you seeking 91 days to file a request for restitution?
I am, Your Honor, please.
I'll grant that.
Well, like I said, well, you guys didn't hear it because it didn't record apparently, but it's just nerve-wracking to see that there is evidence that supports that Nichol did hamper, did cause some issues. How much of that we don't know. We can't find out because this man doesn't want to open it up. He thinks it's done. That's why I'm hoping in the next 4 years after this man is done, somebody goes, we need to look at this like ASAP. This should have been looked at a long time ago. And I feel like it's going to be too late and somebody's going to be completely gone. And I mean, it's already been 7 years and it's still bothering a lot of us. Dad, especially, moms at home, and we're trying to make sure that this doesn't happen again. That people see the signs or see that something's going on in their marriage with their husbands or wives or whatever have you. It just, I want NK just to be talked to. Give us an hour and we'll find out. And then this case will never be talked about as much as it is today. And again, it's not just me. This case has been talked about for 7 years by hundreds, thousands, millions of people before I even touched base on it a year and a half ago. So for those that keep saying, oh, Zawoki's bringing up crap, this stuff has been floating around the internet for years. I just came in. So with that being said, Make sure you guys comment your thoughts down below. Timestamp each section, so when you do comment, I know exactly which part you are talking about, so I can further discuss and debate and so forth a little bit easier. So I'm like, well, where is it that was said? It just helps me out. And then don't forget to go over to Secret in the Dark, give them some love and so forth like that. Again, thank you guys for being here. Please take care, be safe, and as always, keep nerding on. We will see you guys in the next video. Peace.